Megalopolis is complicated. Megalopolis is an epic from Francis Ford Coppola, a man who needs no introduction in the filmmaking world. A generation ago, Coppola began influencing film and hasn't stopped. His influence is measured in decades, solidifying him as a titan of film history. And Megalopolis feels like a distillation of a life's work and attempting to shove it into a 2-hour and 15-minute film, which I think leads into one of my biggest takeaways from Megalopolis. Megalopolis is just itself. It has no interest in holding the audience's hand through the experience. The raw experience of distilling a master's entire lifetime of work into a movie. You're probably thinking I'm saying Megalopolis is a master's masterpiece. No, it's not a masterpiece. When I say it's a distillation of a master's lifetime of work, I literally mean that. How does a master become a master? They make a lot of mistakes to become that master. And Megalopolis makes a lot of mistakes. Characters' storylines randomly start and get cut off. Motivations that make you scratch your head, dialogue that is completely scrubbed and then poorly ADR'd over the lips of something else and it doesn't match up properly, and just straight up continuity errors, a big one around the climax of the film. So if you're looking for an actual Coppola masterpiece, you should watch The Godfather or Apocalypse Now or something like that, because a Megalopolis is a messy mind palace of Coppola's visions of how he sees the world and how he critiques society. It is sort of like being inside of his psyche a little bit. And I'd say the film has this feeling that you're kind of watching two films at the same time. There is the literal characters of New Rome and their trials and tribulations as Caesar attempts to create Megalopolis. Then there is a story of symbology and timeless archetypes that each character embodies. The main symbol of America being a new Roman Empire that is soon to collapse under its own weight. I really enjoy how this is America, but aesthetically it's covered in a Roman flavor, from the hairstyles to the clothes. It's an interesting style choice, but also gives us an ironic distance to it all, so Coppola can hold up a mirror to us to show us a metaphor for how gaudy and vapid our own lives are, and how our own world is living in a Roman style of debauchery, but it's not as literally painted as Megalopolis is. And the main issue and thesis of New Rome is that it lacks the proper leadership. The current mayor can't cut it. He is too compromised and caught up in the minutiae of New Rome to have a proper vision to a functioning society. And we are sort of presented with two options for new leaders of Rome. And ironically, they come from two men of the same elitist family. And I'm not sure if this is a commentary on sort of an implicit caste system of America that isn't spoken about, but also I think we can have a level of criticism of Coppola's philosophy here. He sort of sees that society needs to be led by some sort of elitist, sort of old money ruling class type of person or family here. And I would say that there's a lot of inherent flaws with that, but I think that also it might just be that he's trying to show us something, but also the purposes of the story of the family drama is important here. We are given the option of Caesar, a visionary artist with utopian ideas and signs that will allow the people a dialogue to express themselves. And then there's the option of Claudio, the impulsive tyrant who uses populism to express the anger of the people, which eventually devolves, as we see through the symbology surrounding Claudio's henchmen, it devolves into fascism. And heavy-handedly, Coppola is telling us his opinions on Trump by associating Claudio with Trump, and then associating Nazi and fascist imagery with signs of people saying to make New Rome great again. And also the imagery of fascism, of literal fascists like Hitler and Mussolini later in the film, likes to paint a picture of a cycle of free society to tyranny to fascism, and then reborn again to start the cycle over again. This is the main crux of the conflict of Megalopolis. But there are countless other subplots and themes that are explored. Some are better than others, and the biggest issue being there are too many themes and too many subplots that are picked up and abruptly put down without really being finished. I would say the film is at its best when it just gives up on trying to tell any sort of conventional story and goes into moments of fast editing, music, and motion graphics. These moments express more to me than the traditional scenes and highlight Coppola's mastery as a filmmaker. It seems like Megalopolis wants to be sort of a Koyaanisqatsi-esque cavalcade of images, but it keeps getting dragged back into being a Hollywood movie trying to have traditional plot lines, traditional story arcs, when I think in a lot of ways you could cut out a lot of that noise and just focus the film on purely being this sort of primal experience of images and sounds that creates an effect, which I think would be great because those moments are wonderful in the film. And then we get back to the actors trying to act and trying to competently tell this story, and it just feels like there's too much and it's not all there, and we're kind of left questioning things because we don't fully understand the full context of what the story is being told in these literal terms. Whereas the fast-paced editing sequences without plot express the feelings that I think Coppola is trying to get across to us without having to tell us the literal story that he's also trying to tell. And I would be very interested in seeing like a non-dialogue cut of the film, because I think that would probably make the film way better and just have it be pure emotion and pure feeling rather than it trying to be literal. And I think that Coppola makes sort of a very interesting new experimental style of filmmaking here. I also feel like, though, that it doesn't fully get its ideas across. And I think that there's a lot to pick apart with his ideas. He sort of likes to frame this world that we're in as the Western concept of civilization are the only options we have. We either cling to the way things have always been, or we choose to renew, the way Caesar is saying it. And while I do believe that Caesar is trying to sort of show us a third way rather than keeping things the same or devolving into anarchy and tyranny, I do think that there are things you can look at comparatively between other civilizations, non-Western civilizations, that would be helpful in this process, and there's things to learn from that, rather than just sort of throwing it all away and sort of looking at the world and the history of the world up until this point as sort of a mono-Western culture, which I just kind of just don't agree with. I also don't agree with the framing of sort of the elitist family always being necessary, because it seems like even with Caesar prevailing in the end, being able to create Megalopolis, it's still integral that his uncle gives him the funding for it, and even though in a lot of ways you could see the uncle as a bad character, he is somewhat lionized at the end of the film by being shown as sort of a charitable figure. And I think that that's also sort of a whitewashing of sort of capital's hold on our society. And I have to say, it feels really hard to give a grade to Megalopolis. I kind of want to give it an A- and a D at the same time. It's kind of like watching two films a little bit go past one another. It's definitely not a masterpiece, but it's definitely not the worst film either. And I think the real accomplishment of Megalopolis is that it leverages the brain and psyche of Coppola and the history of his life's works and creates something that transcends a traditional definition and creates something of a new type of film that is kind of beyond giving a grade to. It is somewhat like his reputation does precede him and affects the viewing of this film, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a negative thing, because I think that's kind of what helps make the film tolerable. It does make it beyond sort of giving it a traditional score. It just is what it is, I guess, is sort of a better description of it. And I would say the real question is if anyone will be able to begin to expand upon what he has done with this film. It's kind of like, will there be another artist as iconic as Coppola who at the end of their career will decide to make a film like this and then expand upon sort of the style and the structure of this sort of concept, because it is very unique and very undone before. I mean, he is visionary. It is a new type of film, but I don't know if it's necessarily the type of film that audiences want to watch, or even critics like myself really want to watch. So it's interesting, it's iconic, but is it actually something we want to watch is the better question. And I think we'll see if maybe this starts a new trend of new films. I kind of doubt it, honestly, but it's interesting to see what happens in the future. And I think that's sort of what Coppola does lay out a little bit, is it's like kind of his passing of the baton a little bit. This film is sort of this culmination of his life. I mean, the style of New Rome goes between feeling like early 20th century to late 20th century to the early 21st century. It's sort of like his mind of his experience of New York. And it'll be interesting to see what new future the end of this era and the beginning of a new era will bring. Thanks for listening to my analysis and review of Megalopolis. It means a lot if you would like and subscribe to the channel, and if you wouldn't mind considering supporting me on Patreon. It goes a long way to helping me make more of these videos. Thank you.